let's shake things up. I said I hardly see.
I tried. Rich gave me the evil eye. So
no, I was fine.
no, I saw the eye.
No, I'm good.
Can I tell you, say how weird it is? We have 4 minutes to go, and usually we're scrambling, and we're like twiddling our thumbs. Oh, well, there are people here.
The important.
Must be July 5th.
Must be July.
Ben is Doc.
Oh, wait, Ben is here.
Hey, Ben, what does the B stand for? In Benjamin B.
Hey, Chris. I'm excited to see the Reverence.
My birthday is June 31st.
Because I look at your name and I think Benjamin Britten, but that's a musician brain, so I wondered what the B was.
No, like, musical number?
No comment.
Singing the quote, but you will not.
I'm friends with your wife on Facebook now.
You're gonna have to go harass Patrick and see if he's gonna violate my privacy.
I'll just ask your wife.
Stacy and Connie were tired of
Don't give me a hard time yet.
It's so quiet.
Magic questions. Before you go online. Ben,
Quick quote, like,
Ben, are there any problems with online?
You should have
Let
just
me get to that page.
poured your way
I know what they're about. Just didn't do every single, I just read every. We had executive order, we had executive session.
I have to wear these short socks.
These would be quick. My quote is just a little bit shorter and she's marked like.
So I just wear white socks.
Yeah. So you just wrote these chapters and
How many do you think internal?
it was mostly for dogs.
I'm guessing 3.
Yeah. 3. Yeah. Okay, that's good. I was interested in same page. I love that. I can come on the same page.
6:59.
Yeah. You and your wife doing fun stuff this summer? No, we ran out. But I only ran out because her. Oh my gosh, that is the quintessential retirement purchase. You don't put those cheese accessories. You're set. Younger and there's a lot of girls. Of course I was. She walked in. Oh, that's fantastic. So where are you gonna start? No. No, but we're looking back over and going. Just because I have fun to go to the hospital. Yeah. You know, I tell my kids all over the place.
Are we good? Okay. All right, welcome to board meeting. We're going to officially call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, July 5th, 2022. Let's start by indicating who's here. Let's start with Clark this time.
Clark Nelson.
Julie Jackson.
Nicole McDermott.
Connie Burgess. Chris Wynn.
Terry Bodden. David Garrett. Rich Nye.
And Karen Winder. Welcome to all those in attendance. We're happy to have you here with us this evening, and also those listeners online. Thanks for joining us this evening in the middle of summer. We want to start with some introductions. We have Michelle Jones here from GEA. Welcome, Michelle. We have from Gaspar Classified, Damien. Okay. Oh, are you here representing? Tell us your name. Nicholas, welcome. Welcome. And Damien. Okay, still here. Let's see. I know Julianne was here earlier from Office Professionals. I don't see her right now. PTA, I don't think we have a representative tonight. You can tell it's summer in our foundation. Okay, we're going to move on to our pledge of allegiance led to us by John Welborn tonight.
The audience, please arise. Please repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Our reverence this evening will be given by Chris Nguyen.
Thank you, Karen. I'm not singing or dancing. I walked a whole parade yesterday, so I'm real tired. I have a quote by Mark Twain that I loved. It reads, "Despite its faults, I'm grateful to live in the United States. I love this country. We can seek to improve it and at the same time be grateful for all the good it has done for so many. Loyal to country always. Loyal to government when it deserves it." And I feel like with our climate right now, this is so true. And I just think I'm so proud to live in a community and a country where we can celebrate how we want and who we want. And I'm just grateful for our freedoms. That's my reverence.
All right, very appropriate. Thank you, Chris. I don't see any grant elected officials in the audience, and I have not been made aware of any patron participation. Is this true, Ben? Nobody signed up? All right. So we will move on to our consent agenda. Board members have had the entire agenda for since Wednesday or Thursday last week. Are there any? Do we have a motion?
Motion that we accept the consent agenda.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second on the table to approve the consent agenda. Any questions, concerns, or comments?
I had a quick question on the graduation schedule. Is there ever a rotation of the schools? I know some schools are driving a significant distance, for example, to the Huntsman Center or elsewhere. Is there a rotation to kind of spread that opportunity to travel around a little bit?
Within those schools that go to Huntsman? Is that what you mean?
So, yeah, or
Who wants
the
to speak
Maverick
to that,
Center.
John?
Either way.
We tend to rotate the times, but the location we don't tend to rotate as much. We can look at that. Some years, though, there was a time when we did them all at the Huntsman. And this year, what we tried to do is we tried to put them all on one date, so that we can give all schools an opportunity to work with students clear up to the last minute to help them graduate. So this year we put them all on the same date, but we could look at that possibly in the future as far as rotating the location, not just the times. So,
Is there any reason why we wouldn't?
I think Taylorsville's the only one that's a west side that goes to the Huntsman, and I've never heard.
Cypress does.
Oh, Cypress does as well. I'm
Cypress
sorry.
always has gone to the Huntsman.
Okay. Do they want to go to Huntsman or?
I just heard a lot of parents and students ask why this year. Why do we go to the Huntsman Center? And I just didn't have an answer for them. So I did reach out to John and got some information of how that's planned through the principals and schools. So.
Well, and I know, I think some of it's just rooted in tradition as well. Kearns, Granger, and Hunter, where they are so close to the Maverick Center, especially Hunter and Granger, where they reside in West Valley, and the venue is in West Valley City. I think there's been a big effort to make it feel like their hometown venue as far as Granger and Hunter goes, and Kearns, I think, goes along with that too. But does that at least give some insight, Clark?
yeah, we typically have looked at proximity as being the number one factor, but then the tricky part is, so like the University of Utah can accommodate 4 in a day, where at Maverick, just due to the traffic flow, it's the most they could do is 3. And so if we looked at doing that, the question has come up, maybe Kearns and Taylorsville could be, but I think Skyline and Olympus have, because it's closer to the Huntsman, they've appreciated being at the Huntsman. And so,
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. I would assume Cypress would feel the same way about the Maverick Center because it's much closer than the Huntsman Center, right?
Now, Now, you were out of Cypress. I heard that the Cypress people really liked it.
Terry, do
think
you
it
want to pull
depends.
down your mic so the online listeners can hear?
I think that depends. It could change. I mean, there was a time when I was principal out at Cypress, and we'd asked the community council and the SBOs, and they liked it, the U of U, but they're not saying that there aren't folks that wouldn't like it, and that could change over from time to time. There are pros and cons to both venues for sure, but we have just been trying to be proactive in securing the locations as quickly as possible so that we can get it on the calendar and then let people know. But we can look at that in future years, perhaps.
Well, I haven't heard anything from Taylorsville. I remember when they had to do it on the football field and how grateful people were when we finally were able to get to the Huntsman Center, so.
Well, and I agree, the venue it's nice to have a location where you don't have to worry about whether you can invite families who want to come, more family members. I'm just wondering if there's some, maybe we can look further for the next possible, maybe some rotation in there, maybe Kearns and Cypress switching or something up to that, I guess.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that in the future.
Thank you.
All right, any other concerns or questions with the consent? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, on to our information items. First one of the night, strategic plan oh my goodness. It's July. Okay, let me try that again. Strategic plan progress. And Dr. Nye is going to lead us through this discussion to kind of share where we are and where we want to go.
Thank you, Board President, members of the board. It's a pleasure to come and speak with you about the progress that we've made regarding our strategic plan and what those priorities are. As you recall, last fall, we identified a need that a strategic plan uniquely serves in providing a guidance of priorities that we engage in the district, even down from what it is we do in the classroom to resource allocation and budgets. And so over the last several months, we've been working, gathering subject matter experts and a few other patrons and stakeholders, and really began to flesh out what is a 30-page draft of the Graduate of Granite. Now, this is Rick and I are going to just give you a little teaser this evening, preemptively, as we prepare a few adjustments. As I mentioned, this is a draft, but would like to circulate it with you in the very, very near future to get your eyes on it, see what it is, see what it isn't, and then be able to engage in conversation and dialogue. In terms of timeline, we'll get this out to you in the next couple weeks. At that point, you'll have a chance to review it, and then we'll start rolling out for additional feedback from other stakeholder groups for your consideration, for our consideration, as to what may still needs to be considered as we identify this document. So tonight, it'll just be a teaser in terms of showing what that framework looks like, and here's our agenda. So as we take a look at this, one is to identify progress, and progress has been made, considerable progress on this. We're going to talk a little bit about what does it mean to be a graduate of the Granite School District. That was really, and I'll get into it more in just a moment, the overarching question that we needed to answer is what does it mean to be for our students to graduate from the Granite School District? And does our systems that we have in place complement what that strategic impact is? We're going to introduce alignment of this. A strategic plan is only as good as its implementation, execution, and articulation. And so how does this find its way in terms of priority into the classroom? I think all of us have been part of a strategic planning effort where a lot of work goes on, a great document is polished, and it sits literally on the shelf and gains dust without finding its way to implementation. So we'll just use one example of how and articulate one way that we'll see that through. And then lastly, we'll take a look at the board's current mission and vision statement and some discussion around whether or not you'd like to see it continue or what we might do to change or modify. That's to the board's discretion, right? Because that piece, the board's mission and vision, becomes central to this being a living document. as we refer to it often. So with that, I'd like to thank Stephen. Where is Stephen? Stephen was here earlier. Stephen, are you back there in the corner? You ought to be recognized. Okay, we can't stand up and recognize Stephen, but when you get a chance, Stephen, I really appreciate how he captured this visual. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this other than to give him due recognition. It captures what is the logo of the Granite School District and the peaks, but also you see the cap and the graduation cap and tassel in it. Very appropriate for a graduate of Granite symbol. Of course, we'll take feedback on it as well as we look at branding the strategic plan and making it recognizable across multiple audiences. So as we think about the graduate of Granite characteristics, Rick, here to my left, you're right, has been instrumental. He leads our District Improvement Steering Committee, that's DISC. And part of, again, another acronym, right? But that's the District Improvement Steering Committee. So DISC, this is cabinet level positions, former teachers, former administrators, subject matter experts, to engage around these competencies and what it is and how we build out a framework for capturing them. So these characteristics, though, didn't emerge in a vacuum. And Rick, would you like to speak to these competencies and characteristics?
Yes, thank you. Board leadership's seen these through District Community Council. We've spent some time with District Community Council this last year going through these characteristics with them. Developing these was a combination of a few different things. One part are PBL efforts, our proficiency-based learning efforts. Got this ball rolling several years ago where we quickly realized academic proficiency, but then proficiencies in some other big areas being important. So we have pilots out right now this year where replacing our historical citizenship grade, teachers are looking at characteristics and giving a score to students in these areas that you see in front of you. We hope to scale that as we work through some of the other pieces. So that effort was happening. You paired that with what we've seen come out of the State Board of Education around their portrait of a graduate, where that board has really worked hard to identify characteristics of a Utah graduate. And that's been influential on the decision-making around these. And then third is that District Community Council and District Improvement Steering Committee effort as well. So this last school year, we've spent refining these characteristics of a graduate of Granite and have utility not just in naming them, but also in teachers being able to look at these and provide feedback to students on how that's happening, not only within their classroom, recognizing that these are characteristics that are going to help them through college career and life readiness as well.
Thanks, Rick. So as you take a look at our academic proficiency is, well, it's central, right? I mean, you think about what the purpose of public education is, it really is all things academics. But there's also these, this effort to say, hey, what else is needed that complements that academic effort? And to Rick's point, you see these other characteristics that we want to hope to train up and give our students opportunity to learn and grow in. And again, a lot of this came from that previous work and even our engagement with our District Community Council as we did a brainstorming session. They wrote down the post-it notes, we got feedback, we took it back for them for further refinement. So it's been very iterative in the effort. And so as you think about what our experience has been for the last 2.5 years per our COVID experience, certainly there was work and opportunity to improve pre-COVID. COVID has exacerbated some of the issues that we've seen. And sometimes we hear often, right, as we all experience it, of everything that we do, how do we prioritize those things to where they become literal priorities? Because if everything's a priority, what really is the priority? And so it was really for DISC and soliciting that patron and stakeholder feedback to say, how do we strip away some of the stuff that we do and just focus on a handful of priorities to help lift us out of the COVID experience and its impacts, but also set us on a trajectory well into the future that's fundamental to some very specific things. We'll get into a few of what emerged in that space. So as we think about a strategic plan, and I often say it serves as the backbone for any organization. And truly, any organization, education or otherwise in the private industry, rarely has seen the outcomes that they hope to achieve in the absence of a strategic plan. It serves as that North Star, that guide, that roadmap, what have you, in terms of identifying that as, in terms of how it functions. But for what we've done is, again, taking a strategic plan by name, our case, Graduate of Granite, and making it actionable at the classroom level. And so what you're going to see here in just a moment are priorities. Priorities are going to be named. There's 3 of them. Beneath each priority, there's objectives. These are our measurables. You've heard me talk about mission, vision, and measures, right? What are our measures to see that we're improving? And then what actions, or think strategies, are we going to take to meet those objectives, those goals that are aligned to our priorities? And so even by strategy, and not scripted strategies, if you will, right? There's a lot of latitude, and you'll see here, I'll use an example here, but you'll also see in this document, there's a lot of latitude at the school level to identify school level needs within this framework. And we'll demonstrate that in just a moment. And you know me well. If you want me to pause or you have a comment or question to clarify, please just interrupt, and that'll be perfectly fine. So as we think about what our strategic impact is, again, going back to the roots of our academics, the graduation rate for the Granite School District has been hovering around the mid-70s. And so as we consider what that means with COVID and some impacts, we won't know this year's graduation rate until actually September 30th is when students who are completing during the summer have an opportunity to finish up that still count toward the graduation rate. So we'll know, but we're anticipating it'll be right about there again, which is to say something and should be celebrated considering some of the challenges we've had this last year and the year before that's caused students to miss and have attendance issues, and we've seen some behaviors that we haven't seen before. So we'll see that in just a moment.
I have a question. Does that 70%, 70 what odd, count from 9th grade to 12th? So by the time they get to 12th grade, it's 70% from 9th grade.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so think about it in a cohort, right? So you have a group of 9th grade students, and it's calculated at the federal level, right? The federal 4-year graduation cohort rate is what it's called. And so what you end up having is, for the number of students that start with us as 9th graders, how many are still with us, I mean, in brief, by the time they graduate as seniors? Now, you do have some students that will move out, some 9th grade students that move out, and let's say they move from here to, I don't know, Alpine School District, and they re-register there, then they're not part of our cohort anymore. They don't count in the denominator when calculating the graduation rate. Now, with that being said, if a student moves out and they don't register somewhere, or they move out of the country, or, then it is counted in the denominator, and they are considered a dropout, right? As we calculate the division of that with the numerator. And so we do a very good job, and we have to do a good job to make sure, hey, when a student's leaving us, are we tracking them down? And that looks like a host of different things, right? Is it getting them re-registered in another school district? Is it doing a home visit to see if the family still is there and the child's just not coming to us anymore, and finding out why? And so you know, we'll do due diligence, but they get coded. If they drop from our enrollment from 9th to 12th grade, they need a code essentially that attributes to that graduation effort.
So what happens when you have somebody who decides to do like homeschool? Is there a way, how do they do that? Do they officially have to declare that? And if they don't, they still are counted, correct?
Yes, if they don't do that. So that's a homeschool affidavit. And so if a family comes to us and say, hey, I'd really like to homeschool my child, then they have to sign here on the dotted line that they're assuming the responsibility of the education of that child. And in that case, it gets coded, right, as a homeschool and doesn't count toward dropout. So as we think about two things to focus on, one is that graduation rate. We want to improve the graduation rate. What Graduate of Granite does is offer a value proposition to what does it mean to be a graduate. It's not just accepting a graduation for graduation's sake, although there is some merit to that, but it's how well prepared, and that's what you'll see in here, some metrics. How well prepared is that child when they graduate for post-secondary passions or pursuits? Whatever it is they want to do after high school, right? 'Cause graduation really is a through point. And then the other part of that is proficiency. So I'll go back to the target, 83% by 2027 is what our intended graduation rate will be. Currently, we're at 77%. Now, to get from 77% to 83% in the district, you're approximately adding 300 students, or about 50 a school year, to reach that target, and it's doable. We can do this, right? As we identify and you'll see in just a moment, and in this document, specific strategies and action steps to help make sure that we're on track for that graduation rate. Okay, and then the second part of that is increasing proficiency. We want to increase proficiency in the English language arts and math. And so 2 overarching strategic impact goals that kind of guide the rest of the strategic plan. So, Rick?
I just want to chime in a little bit on that last side. I think the superintendent makes a great point with and I like the language of value proposition. A graduation rate can be manipulated in certain ways, so that proficiency piece adds this nice check to that graduation number. So it adds a value proposition to your diplomas, and I thought that's a nice balance, and we had that discussion amongst the group as we developed it. Go ahead, Julie.
On that second goal on the last slide about the 39% proficiency, where are we at now? Just to give me an idea of how far we have to come to go.
Go ahead.
Just kidding, it's not moving. So for math, we're at 25%. 25%. English, we're at 42. I was going to say 43 percent. So we have some between the two, right? So we don't average averages. That's illegal in the statistics world. All right, illegal's harsh, but we don't do that, right? So we don't average averages. Correct. Yeah, applied mathematics teacher right here. So she appreciates that. But to that end, it's identifying what those numbers are. Now, per that, the feedback we can receive and will receive is, do we want to separate those, math and English language? Maybe. Do we want to keep them together? I mean, so that's, but that's where we're at today.
I see. Okay, I get the numbers then. Now that you say that.
And you do see it separated under objectives, where we have a literacy objective and a numeracy objective, where we've split out some of those measures there. The visual you have in front of you is just
Rick, I have a quick question.
Oh, yeah,
What's the state average? Do you know off the top of your,
I don't.
just to compare something?
It's not enormously higher, mid-50s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
50? Okay.
Yeah. And that's a piece that we struggle with, because, boy, that just seems very low percentage. So it's nice putting that up against what's the state average. And we know, and we've said to the board in the past, there is some correlation on proficiency and socioeconomic status and some of those things. I mean, not making that as an excuse, but you do see that trend across the state as well. The visual you have in front of you is just trying to break apart the strategic plan in a visual. So you have your goals at the top, our graduation goal and our proficiency goal. To reach those goals, we prioritize 3 areas: academics or academic priority, social skills and dispositions priority, and a talent development priority. Those 3 priorities, within those, have objectives, actions, and measures, just like the superintendent explained. And then continuous improvement plans, being the foundation there, is the piece where a school would identify what it is they want to work on, what specific actions do they have, and how does that fit in an objective, how does that fit in a priority, and how is that pushing us to reach our goals. So the rest of the slide deck is breaking that apart and explaining each of those elements to you.
And just a word about those three priorities. Academics, again, is a given, right? That's what we do in education. Social skills and dispositions, that's that engagement from student to student, student to teacher, teacher to student. What does that look like? And use some examples there. And then this third priority can't be overstated either, right? So the first two really are attending to the needs of the students as is appropriate. That third is tending to the needs of those who tend to the needs of students. And so that's our employees. And so how are we intentionally, strategically investing in our employees to the things that they need to be able to grow in their capacity and in the practice of being an educator? And again, anyone that works for the Granite School District is an educator, right? Because that's our business. But it's just being very intentional about how we invest in our people, how we help them grow where they want to grow, and how are we thinking strategically in meaningful action. And so the academic priority has, as in terms of priority, three objectives: literacy performance across the scale, math across the scale, and personalized competency-based learning. So you look at the individual measures, right? So the priority is academics. Here are our three objectives in that space, and this is what we're going to measure along the way to see if we're making improvement. That's where, to Rick's point, 44% of grades 3 through 8 will demonstrate that proficiency. Math has a target, and personalized competency-based learning as well. We can look right now, and we'd be able to provide the data as you know, we provide indicators of progress. We can identify what percentage of students are on track to graduate. What is our goal? To increase the number of students that are on track to graduate. And same thing in course enrollment trends. As we take a look at our courses, course enrollment, how do we make sure that under the banner, or the umbrella, if you will, of personalized competency-based learning, or PCBL, students are having that experience with their parents, helping them decide what that educational experience looks like for them. So just by way of an example, right? So priority academics, here's the objectives, here's measures, but here's our action. What specific action steps are we going to take that are aligned to accomplishing that outcome? And there's a lot of fine print on here, but that's just lifted right from the document that we'll provide for you to review. But for an example, K-3 literacy has to be a priority. Now, under this objective, pre-K literacy performance, there's 10 action steps that we're going to prioritize as a district. Again, of everything that we do, how do these things rise up to the priority? So as you can imagine, try to unpack, and this has been the work of the DISC and others, to say, as subject matter experts, of everything that we do, how do we prioritize just a few things that we're really going to focus on? And so you'll see there's certain things that the district's going to do. In terms of an organized effort, a systematic effort to prioritize this and this action step, there's something there the school can do very specifically, so they see themselves in the work. And then what is a complementary measure? Well, 60% of all students will make typical or above typical progress in grades K-3 as measured by Acadians by 2023. Again, we have some baseline data, and incrementally, how we're going to hit that and the action steps that we're going to follow.
Transparently as well, when you look at the document and you look at the action steps that are named, not all of those are new. So as we developed this, we identified a lot of the actions that we currently do that we think were high impact actions that we're currently doing, and you'll see those. Now there are new actions as well, but it's a good mix. We didn't come up with new actions across the board. We identified some of the things we currently do that we feel are high impact as well.
So with this plan, with the objectives, it kind of holds the teachers in a way that a little bit more accountable to care or to do what's right for the student. I don't know exactly how to say it, but it helps the teachers because as you work, like you said, to help the employees, that you kind of focus that we're going to help you in this way so you can help the students, right?
Yeah, certainly, and it helps answer also the question for a teacher. When we ask for new things, and this is incumbent upon education generally, right, public ed specifically, but so much we're putting more stuff on teachers' plates. this helps identify what maybe should be on that plate and what shouldn't, right? And be able to say, and to that end, right, it's an alignment of effort. So if you take a look at this in terms of what the district's going to do and what the schools are going to do, the Haggerty Phonemic Awareness Program, Phonics 2.0, Literacy Intervention Modules, K3, all of that is very evidence-based as to have good impact for students. So as you can imagine, a teacher working, identifying, hey, how am I doing in this space? Maybe I need to talk to my principal, have them reach out to the literacy team at the district. Maybe I need a little training on whatever it may be. Again, it's just talking about capacity one, but looking at student impact for that effort, which really needs to be the question that we always have first and foremost is how does this impact primarily for students, but then how are we going to help our educators be successful in that space, right, to be able to do that. So it is an alignment of effort between the principal, the teacher, the district, all of us to say, you know what, early literacy really, really is important. And, you know, that K3 is such a delicate time to grow a child's capacity to do that, that largely if they're not at that grade level by 4th grade, they really begin to be set up for challenge in every other grade from then until the time they graduate. We'll intervene, we'll provide, you know, that level of intervention, but at the end of the day, they are substitutes to what needs to happen in K3. So that's why you see this one. But to that end, yeah, if I'm a K3 teacher, I'm looking at that, or, you know, pre-K, I'm like, okay, you know what, we're going to focus on these things, and then we're going to see how students are doing with it. And are we reaching that goal? Why or why not? So this is, to that earlier point, a very living document. So this, there's one of 10 actions here in this space. This is one of them. Are they working or are they not? Meaning if we're implementing something with fidelity in terms of an action step, in terms of strategy, but we're not necessarily seeing the impact for kids, we need to be able to rethink that and not just hold to something. If it's being implemented with fidelity, we're controlled, you know, multivariate analysis to control for, you know, different variables, right, or covariates. In other words, we're measuring the right thing because we're doing everything that we can in this space and we're still not seeing impact for students. Then we need to rethink it and be able to identify what opportunities. Think about any one of these programs. I won't name them because, as you can imagine, these programs right now have shown good success. We just need to be able to make sure that we're double down on them. So, to that end. So that's an example. So you see the same thing for, and you will in this document, you'll see the same thing for some math, right? In terms of strategies, there's 7 prioritized actions under math. Competency, personalized competency-based learning, there's 10 prioritized actions in that. And that's where you see different coursework opportunities as they may develop in that space, right? Working with families. If fine arts, something in the fine arts is a personalized pathway, how do we look at enrollment trends, even in our own district, make sure, well, are we delivering on providing a personalized pathway and actually increasing enrollment in some of these programs as well that help answer that call. But things like that still need to be fleshed out in terms of what that means like in that engagement phase. Julie?
I know that this is a rough draft, so are these measures that you've chosen, are they set in stone, or
No.
where did they come from? Okay.
Yeah, short answer, they're not.
I just
But
see
again,
that literacy performance is a huge increase by next year. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, these guys are ambitious.
We are. So, I mean, we're talking about a 2% gain. I think we can get.
Oh, I thought you
5.
said we were at 25%.
That's math. So, yeah, math is
okay,
still.
so in math is where I'm.
Yeah, math is still.
That's where I'm impressed.
Yeah, and I bet Ms. Jones would like to see an increase in that. Yeah.
That's where I'm like, I think I better go be a tutor.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because otherwise we're never going to meet that.
Well, and that's a great point too, Julie. We had a lot of discussion and debate on what's a realistic but still ambitious goals. We want to be setting ambitious goals, but not unrealistic goals as well. And so that's a piece that will continue to be a discussion, but we have had a lot of discussion around that on that proficiency side and on the graduation rate side. When you get a chance to get into the document and look at each of the prioritized actions and then the measures attached to those, sometimes we struggle to find a good quantitative measure. And so under some of those actions, you're going to see evidence where we've named what are the things we're going to look at to tell us whether this action has been successful or not.
So I have a quick question too. It seems like, is that USBE that has also recommended, hey, this is what we want you to set your goal at? Because it seems like as we've gone to community councils, I've heard that as they've talked about their plans. Or is that a district goal that they've asked, we'd like you to get to this and set this as your goal? Which is that?
Yeah, so it depends on the context. So if it's a turnaround school, there's some very strategic goals that they look to achieve in that space. Literacy performance is one. There is a bar that the state sets on literacy, particularly K-3 performance that we have to meet in terms of that pathways of progress. And so there are some externally imposed, if you will, but generally with good intent that are measurable as well, that become targets for us. Okay. But again, those don't change in the school site level, that autonomy to be able to make some of those determinations.
I think too, Nicole, when you mention community council, oftentimes land trust is a big piece of the community council work, and land trust has, they don't tell you must hit this number, but what they will say is you have to have goals in these areas when it comes to land trust too. So I think when I heard community council in that discussion, land trust oftentimes becomes a big piece of that work.
Thank you.
Social skills and dispositions priority. It's very important that we define this clearly as to what it is and also what it is not. So what you'll see here under the umbrella of social skills and dispositions are tiered interventions and supports. So as we know, we have different behaviors playing out with students, and some kind of serious behaviors playing out at even younger ages than what we've seen typically. And one of the issues that is, well, behaviors in the classroom and in the halls is a tremendous issue. So how do we build up a comprehensive system, behavioral system for the district, and make sure that we have that system implemented? One, and that's what you're seeing here, is proactive, meaning how do we prevent some of the behaviors by teaching these skills, these interactions, how peers engage with peers, or if there's an indiscretion, how do we, and that's the reactive part of it. But what is our system when a student doesn't engage in school the way they should, right? Think even bullying. We see instances of that when, again, we don't tolerate that, or harassment or anything else like that. So how do we create a space where we foster the creation of, and we have these systems in place. Now, a lot of this is new. What is new is how do we measure, and it's not altogether new, but it's captured here as such. How do we measure that percent? And there's instruments that we have. And so just a few more, right? Acronyms: tiered fidelity inventory, a rubric-based walkthrough tool to measure that positive behavioral interventions and supports, or PBIS. And you've probably heard of PBIS. And for a school to demonstrate, depending on where they're at, a sustainability score of 70% in both. As you can imagine, we've got a baseline on that, right? And our second measure of that is each school having and they do, PBIS team completes that BOC, or benchmark of quality, with at least 90% implementation, or if they're already at, or maybe if they're at 90%, great. They're at maintaining that level of systems of support. If not, what does growth look like? And it's very reasonable to say, hey, how are we growing at least by 10% the implementation of this behavior system to answer these questions? And there's 3 prioritized actions to that.
Can I just jump in real quick? So as we met with community councils and we talked with a lot of parents about this, I was super impressed because the parent feedback especially, and they know their kids the best, right? What they wanted out of a graduate, a lot of these social skills, respect, responsibility, hard work, kind of that resilience, all of those soft skills. I mean, a lot of this is centered around academics, and that's why we're here. We want kids to graduate. We want them to be prepared for the next step. But I find it fascinating that we just kind of are merging everything together to try to, come up with a system to measure the social skills. Because, in the old days, it's like, okay, you have a citizenship score. Okay, what does that mean? So to actually have a metric now to be able to encourage kids to have these positive social skills and behaviors in the classroom, that was one of my big takeaways as we met with parents in the community council. And we spent quite a bit of time on that, if you recall, Rick, just kind of centering how important these social skills are. So I'm happy to see an actual measure to go along with them.
Great. And Board President, may I engage Assistant Superintendent Bell?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Leslie, is there anything?
Leslie, sorry.
Leslie, is there anything else you would add to the TFI, PBIS, or BOC?
No, I wouldn't add anything other than, we work through things proactively first before we react. And so the more we can plan and prepare for things to happen in the classroom, the better things go. The more we're reactive to the behavior, the less likely we are to see success. So we'll take a proactive approach.
Yep, proactive and a very systemic, even systematic approach to it. How do we build the systems to make sure we can do that and expectations? Thank you. Another one, attendance. Attendance has been this last year unlike anything we've seen. And one thing we don't want to be guilty of is just kind of throwing our hands up and say, well, there's nothing we can do about it, right? There's things that we can do, and we're just being very strategic. There's 3 prioritized actions that we can take. One is to really identify, and you see the measure there, is how do we increase by 10% or higher, and again, there's actions associated with this, the number of students. As we know, chronic absenteeism rates at about, 10 absences over the course of the school year? Just 10. These can even be excused, but they fall into that category of being chronically absent. And when we know they're not with us, that, when they come back to us, there's a lot of makeup and intervention that needs to occur. So we're just being very clear. One thing that we can do in terms of that measure is encouraging, making sure that we're taking attendance, just so we have some clean data that we can start. And we have found that sometimes that is a struggle. And teachers starting class, kids are coming in, they're doing the readiness activity or that bell work, and it's like you have to try and carve out some space to take some attendance. And sometimes that's tough. But at the same time, it's so very important for us to be able to say who's in our schools, who's not in our schools, and what measured interventions do we need to engage with our non-attenders.
So I've heard an issue from several parents who brought this up that said that their kids have figured out that my citizenship is going to lower if I'm tardy to class, but it won't be affected if I'm just absent. So they just skip class. So how are we? What are we doing to address this? Because that's got to be part of why we're seeing some of this, right?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer to that one. I would be surprised if that is on a large scale. I think maybe that could happen, but as I think through it, that attendance, unless it's excused by the parent, hurts your citizenship worse than being tardy to class. So I'd probably want a little more information to understand how that happens. I think what I saw, and this is anecdotally going back to my experience in schools, is sometimes the what would be the word? Maybe shaming of being late would cause students to maybe skip entirely rather than come in that late and suffer the consequences. I experienced that anecdotally more than I saw. I'm worried that tardy is going to hurt my citizenship, so I'm just going to skip.
But I had kids who, bless their hearts, could write their own excuse and sign my name.
Can I give you an example? I can tell you this happens at Granger High, and it frustrates me. There's a thing called OCR. I don't know why it's still a thing. I don't even know what it stands for. But basically, if you're late and you're in 9th and 10th grade, instead of going to the class late and learning things, you sit in the alumni room, not allowed to work on anything, and you sit. I don't get the point of that. I would rather have a kid attend 60 minutes, maybe not the 85, but 60 minutes of a class. So that would be something that could fall into this that's going to lower our goal, but it's because of us. We're doing it. We're not allowing them to attend class. They're sitting in a room doing nothing, which I brought up before, by the way. I'm just kind of venting, but it's still happening.
Right. The superintendent's pointing out to me in this document, and again, you'll see this, is one of these action steps we're taking is tasked a district attendance team to shape policies, establish regular communication, and collect data. So as those types of practices come up, this group can review those and provide feedback and give that perspective or angle to whatever location. And maybe that works. I don't think, I intuit that it does, but at least someone's looking at those types of practices, examining them, and giving feedback to locations as well.
I would like some follow-up on that.
And I just, I know we have this new, we're trying out the new system as far as giving, the soft skills grade separate from the citizenship. And I'm really excited about that because I think that is absolutely essential. But it really does, even parents who are like, well, I don't want my kid to, to graduate, we'll write an excusal note for him, or the kid will write their excusal note, or, it just, if attendance is the priority, which we want them to be in the class and learning, right? Then we've just got to separate that from, I know there has to be a consequence for them being tardy because perpetual tardies are also a problem. I understand. It's very disruptive to your class. But at the same time, not having them there is so much worse than, if they miss a whole class period, that's so much worse than, walking in 10 minutes late.
Right.
So
what you're naming, Nicole, is in the graduate granted characteristics in the schools that we're piloting this, again, going back to the roots of proficiency-based learning and that score being on what you know academically, there was always this element, and I would have had this as a teacher too, around, well, what about responsibility? What about being on time? What about those types of things? And in separating those, we quickly learned we needed a more sophisticated feedback ability than just the citizenship grades. So separate it out. And we're working through, this isn't all unicorns and rainbows. We're having to work through some of the logistical challenges of issuing more scoring, but scoring communication, scoring hard work and resilience, respect, dependability does remain tardies and absences, but becomes just one area of feedback that a parent would receive, and not the end-all be-all of citizenship. Those other things are considered as well. What you can imagine, and not getting too much into a rabbit hole there, but we'll be back with PBL progress. But what that does do is create a bit of a logistical challenge, being a secondary teacher of that many scores at the end of a term. And so we're talking through logistically how to ease that burden.
Well, and let's not forget, we have COVID, and we're in the third year of that. And so students are used to being absent on a regular basis due to the fact of quarantine and isolation and things like that. So really, it's proactively training kids to come back to school and to be comfortable at school, and to look at punitive practices and get rid of those, and proactively plan toward how do we reintroduce kids back to school to make school meaningful and not have them be absent. So a lot of the laws and things like that have been in a moratorium during COVID, and so those will be released. So we do need to train our kids because there'll be extra expectations that the state has for us.
And as we're training, I just think to make it as easy for kids. I know at Granger, there will be a great group of kids hanging out at seminary, and you go out and you talk to them and you say, hey, why don't you go to school? Let's go to class. You can't be here. And there's like a group of 10, 12 of them, and they say, we don't want to sit in OCR. So they could be 10 minutes late to class and actually learn something that day, but they're choosing not to. So therefore, they're marked absent, adds to the problem, but it's because we're putting obstacles in the way instead of opening the door.
And those are the practices that we evaluate continually as we take a look at this. And so when you get a hold of this, particularly if there's those issues that rise to the surface, yeah, please make comment on there. Does it capture that intent? Is there something that needs to be a little bit more explicit or modified, whatever it may be? That's the feedback that we per multiple people's experience, right? Public education, we have a lot of different people that have a lived experience that's uniquely theirs. But at the same time, we want to capture that, whether you're a teacher, administrator, a parent, a board member, whatever it may be. What is that perspective to help shape that? Sense of belonging, we want our kids to feel like they belong at school. We know when a student doesn't feel like they belong at school, they act out, they don't attend. So how are we being very strategic? And so we have 5 prioritized actions in that space to help make sure that our kids feel like they belong in school. They want to be there, and that's bordering that, that psychological affective domain, right? We want someone to want to do something. We want our students to want to be at school. At least let us create the conditions to where they feel like they belong in our schools. And so, as we're looking at that, just a couple of targets that we have. You know what? Let's and we're going to have some baseline. We're rolling out, and we'll have our baseline this fall. When we engage our students, we are including our parents in that effort as well to say, hey, what does it look like? And hearing from students. So this is where student voice is critical to helping us understand what their educational experience is. And we want to elevate student voice, right? That's who we serve. The students and their parents, we serve them. How are their children experiencing our schools? This is one of the bigger metrics that says they're going to experience school a whole lot better if they feel like they belong at school. They're not being bullied, whatever it may be, right? They feel like they belong. And so more is to come there. You'll see that in here. There's 5 prioritized actions associated, action steps associated with that to help further along what it means to belong to our campus. What does it mean to be part of our school within our district? Talent development, again, taking care of those that take care of our kids. Recruitment and retention, there's 6 prioritized actions that you'll see in this document. Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to talk about that last one before you went on. This sense of belonging piece, I just wanted to really encourage you to talk to our students at Granite Connect. Mm-hmm. I feel like that is the place where you will find out where we're lacking here. And oftentimes the students we talk to do feel connected because they're at school and they're feeling connected, so they're willing to talk to us. And Granite Connect does such a good job of taking those students who didn't feel like they had a voice and helping them find it. And so that's a really great place, I think, to look for information about this.
That's a good point. Thank you. Yeah, and so as we unpack that, and we'll be fully transparent with everyone, especially prioritizing making sure our parents know what we're engaging their students with, right? It's easy to engage with math and science and ELA and whatever it may be, right, academically, but how are we engaging them to make sure that we're elevating their voice, but in a way that allows their parents to know what we're doing. And to your point, Granite Connect, do we have different students with different experiences that may, for some reason, felt like they didn't belong? And why? Right? And again, it's elevating their voice, and we find trends across why they don't feel like they belong. That's a great place to prior fertile ground to identify some action steps and some strategies to make sure that we're reaching all of our kids to make sure they belong in our schools. We don't want any student to come to our school not feeling like they belong in our schools. Can you imagine? They can't even begin to access the curriculum. They can't even begin to talk about math if they don't, if they don't feel like they should be there. And so it's how do we create a campus that's safe, that's nurturing, that allows our students to feel like it's somewhere they need to be and that we want them to be. Talent development, again, just going back to this, we want to recruit and we want to retain, right? So as you take a look at that, one of those measures are, hey, let's retain at least 85% of our non-retiring licensed graduate educators, right? And so we want to reduce our attrition, if you will, and there's some strategies associated with that. For those that are growing in the educational profession, we want to say if you have that associate's educator license, we're going to help build up the systems and supports to make sure by the end of year 3 that you have your professional license. And we hope to do that with 95% of them. And then such a top priority, making sure that day 1 school starts, we're staffed. And that's, in the best interest of our kids. And so how do we, again, some prioritized actions there, how do we make sure that we're delivering on what essentially is a promise to our children and their families that we're going to provide for them the best education possible. And part of that is being staffed to be able to do that. Another under talent development, just some professional learning. So we have professional growth and evaluation processes each year. 95% will complete that. You take a look at vector compliance training. There's guardrails, right, that we have as educators in which we operate legally. And we want to make sure that everyone's up to date and with their compliance training. And then every school has a continuous improvement plan, and we'll segue in that just in a moment. But what percentage of our schools have been meeting that? and we've got a baseline on that, but our target is 80%. And then PLCs, how well are they serving our purposes and what changes might need to improve there? Anything you want to talk about PG&E? Okay. And 7 prioritized action steps there. Performance evaluation, again, professional growth and evaluation processes, and again, 80%. But there's 4 specific. So you had professional learning, now you have performance evaluation, and 4 prioritized actions associated with that.
Connie, thinking of your question earlier as to what degree does this trickle down to the school, to the teacher level even? I think there's an element that it trickles to the administrator and the school's plan, but where you start seeing conversations happen around continuous improvement is that PG&E process with the teacher. So although this overarching strategic plan does have implications for the classroom, where that becomes very real becomes in my professional growth and evaluation plan that I'm setting with the principal, and I'm looking at student achievement data and striving for those goals.
What does our attrition look like this year? I noticed our separations in our consent agenda. How is that compared to years before?
I don't have, I guess the metric that I bring up in my head, Nicole, is always our new teacher orientation and the size of that. That falls under Lynn Rada's department, and she shares with me what that size is going to be. We were really low, not this coming August, we're a little bit higher than we were the year before. And we'd been low the last couple of years on new hires, number of new hires probably in the 200-ish range. This year, we're up to 350, 380. But prior to those 2 low years, we were having some 400, 500 new teacher years.
Some of that, I remember asking Patrick in HR about this, and a lot of it, when COVID hit, people were losing their jobs, and so we had a very low amount of teachers resign that year because, while it might not be the highest earning income, it was steady and predictable. And so some families, Patrick was basically summarizing, and this doesn't speak for every situation, obviously, but a generalization in that a lot of teachers were sticking with it another year or 2 to get through COVID because of that consistent salary and also the benefits that came with it. That helped the number to be low those particular couple of years.
2 years that were really low, yeah. I think if you were to average the last 15 years, we'll have 300-ish new teachers every year, high 200s in new teachers. When we set the goal on recruitment and retention at 85%, there's a piece of you that says, oh, that's not high enough. We should be much higher. But you'll notice we took out the consider retirees piece, but paired with a lot of teachers start families early on, and it doesn't mean that they won't be back to teaching. It just means that something else is going to be prioritized for them for some time being. So that number we felt like was a good goal, not and a realistic goal.
Nationally, in high impacted districts, the the attrition rate is about 24%, right? So you retain about 76%. So to Rick's point, we feel like 85% if we were able to do that. Factoring, right, those that retire, well-earned retirements, we're not going to hold that against them or us, right? But at the same time, just controlling for that, we feel like just a 15% attrition. And there's lots of reasons. Sometimes they move, whatever it may be. But anyway, we want to decrease that because to that end, we want to be able to retain our excellent employees. And again, just going back to that, I want to just show just one point there. Where does the rubber meet the road on this? And so just by way of an example, what is the SIP, Continuous Improvement or Continuous Improvement Plan? Rick can talk a little bit more about this, but it's something that Aaron Wilson and his team have been working with the principals to identify, hey, how does a school improve? What does that roadmap look like for success as it pertains to the individual school site? And be able to identify within this framework how it might inform their day-to-day.
For August board meeting, we will have in your packets, and maybe even before then, have given you access to all the schools' continuous improvement plans. So you can look at those. What we've tried to do even this year prior to having a complete draft is we've started to try and align what the discussions were with our strategic plan and what continuous improvement plans are going to be. So schools have had 3 areas that they've looked at, and I just clipped and pasted on this slide a piece of the continuous improvement plan, section 6, where the goal setting happens. And you'll see on there, we've shaped school thinking to align with our 3 priorities: academics, social skills and dispositions, and talent development goals. So as they're considering where they're at, they've reviewed their data, we've shaped or created a structure for them to identify goals and actions within their continuous improvement plan that align with the strategic plan. And again, that access will be coming to you for approval in August's board meeting.
So I'll just use number 2 there, social skills and dispositions. You take a look at their goal, right? They want to reduce by 10% the overall number of office disciplinary referrals. It means kids are acting out, they need to be removed from class, they need to be referred to the office. We want to reduce those, right? And how do we do that? Well, proactively through our PBIS systems of supports. At the same time, we're going to have a system for when a child does need to come down to the office to meet with the administrator or counselor or whoever it may be, a social worker. But we want to be able to do that. And that's something that school felt like, that we've got too many kids that are being kicked out of classes to come down to the office. How are we going to proactively do that? And so they have this goal, and then they're going to have some associated action steps that's very specific to their campus, not scripted by us. There's some examples and exemplars, but at the same time, they're going to be able to identify what action steps they need to take as a campus. And so an administrator, whether it be working with the community council, the teacher leader team, the faculty in general, and staff, they're identifying, well, what are our needs given our experience at our specific school within this framework. So, lastly, mission and vision. These are the current mission and goals and vision statement. As you can see there, students leave school prepared for college, career, and life in the 21st century. I don't need to pepper this, but we're almost a quarter of the way into the 21st century. So maybe some wordsmithing on that. But that's up to you. We are definitely in the 21st century, and so it still applies. Don't get me wrong. We definitely, 21st century is an information age or a digital age. And so, yeah, maybe it stands that way. 2 stated goals that we operated on as we looked through and continued to identify. Well, one, of course, is increased achievement for students every year. We identified different metrics for improvement. I think that stands to case. Enrich and increase parent and community engagement. You'll see in this document where there are some parent engagement strategies and expectations because, as we've said, we partner with parents to raise children. Our role is in that education space. So we want to make sure that we're meeting parents where they're at. And then the vision statement, from here, anything is possible. So there's opportunity there, or if you want us to just run with this, or you want to take it to a study session, we are happy to serve at the will of the board.
I have a question. When were these mission and visions adopted by the board? Do you have a date?
So I don't have a date. I did find on some district letterhead that it was at least a few superintendents ago. So
it's before my time, so it's been a minute.
I want to say that those were updated in 2012.
It's 10 years ago.
They may have been updated. I think that from here anything is possible. Actually,
that's been around previous to my.
Which, if I can start there, that's a lovely statement, but I just don't feel like it fits our mission. So I would love, as a board, I don't have the answer today, but I would love to challenge our board to come up with a better vision statement that perhaps can be a little bit more specific to the granted of a graduate and not be fluff and stuff. I feel like anything's possible. Michelle's laughing at me. Do you not like fluff and stuff? Okay. Well, all right. I just think it's too broad. It doesn't mean anything. And if we can't narrow it down to have it really truly mean something, then it shouldn't be a vision statement. But that's just me. Any other? What do you guys think?
I think updating it should be one of our goals.
Update it.
So should we be scheduling, I think this warrants a larger discussion. So are you guys comfortable with really examining this a little closer in a study session?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Our next study session is August.
August. September.
September.
Yep. Is there, we have time to figure the mission and the vision statement out, because I would rather take time and get it right.
Well, and we want to also base it on what our strategic plan is. So
Correct.
we need to see that document and really understand it and grasp it, and then
Get
from there
feedback on
say,
it, yeah.
Yeah,
Multiple
let's,
stakeholders.
So September study session would actually be a good time. So we'll place this discussion there.
Then we can launch in terms of engagement. Like I said, we're going to reach out and get stakeholders involved with this document. They can take a look at, and you may want feedback from the community too. You want people to see themselves in the mission and vision of the Granite School District, right?
Oh, absolutely. We need to reach out to our
promote it.
constituents. We need to reach out to parents especially. It's those kids, they're the parents. So we need to get their voice in there for sure. I would love to even sit down with principals. So in September, school's back in session where we actually can get into the schools, talk to teachers, principals. I'd love to have time to do some homework there.
Oh, that sounds good. So we'll be prepared to help in any way that staff, myself, can help in preparing that discussion, helping facilitating a discussion about mission and vision. And one other element that you hear of are values. So you have mission, vision, values. The board's two stated goals could be part of that, or it's a value, right? It's a value. So you would identify values. One of the values would be enrich and increase parent-community engagement. And what is that value and how is it actuated and things like that. So again, you want people to see themselves in the mission and vision of the Granite School District, collective commitments, if you will, aligned with values of our purpose as articulated to the action steps that translate those ideals into our day-to-day. And that really is the purpose of the strategic plan, as we identify that and as we work together, board and administration and our families to make that, and our employees to make that a reality.
I mean, exactly to that. I'm not giving you any new information. What I'm going to say, I just want to make sure I say it, that as a teacher, I know that I would have looked at this and said, oh, I'll jump through all those hoops, but I'm going to do all this other stuff. I got this whole agenda of stuff I'm going to do, and don't worry, district, I'll jump through your hoops. I wouldn't have internalized it, and it would have taken effort by somebody else to get me on board. Because I wouldn't have jumped on board unless somebody said, unless somebody got me there. And I think it's really important that we make sure to be very thoughtful about how we make this not just, here's how we make sure people do this, but how we make this an integral part of our culture. That it just like becomes, it seeps through everything we do and becomes a natural part, almost instinctive in our teachers. Right? Especially as we bring in new teachers, this is a really great focus for a new teacher to be able, if we can train them, to hone in on these important priorities. So I think that as much work as we've put into figuring out what the graduate of Granite looks like, we need to put that same amount of effort into figuring out how to get buy-in from everybody. And, it might come from also like going to PTAs and having them say, hey, when you do your community carnival, which of these priorities does that align with? Or when you create your science fair, where are you in, and how does that connect to your school improvement, what's it called? Plan. Sorry, I was going to say project, and I knew that was wrong. Anyway, I think that it's really important that we figure out a way to make sure this isn't hoop jumping, because I think it can become that very easily. And then it's a waste of our time.
Right. And to that point, it's seeing ourselves in that work and has us pulling in the same direction, right? To where there is that saturation. And for me, it's not lost on me. The reality is the beginning and end of any educational change, prioritization, reform begins and ends in the classroom in what the teachers say and do, right? And we have supports that help that. We have administration supports that. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't reach that saturation, well, it's nice. But to what end? Because it really has to occur at the student impact level, which, of course, is right there at the teacher's forefront.
And I think part of that also is recognizing, as I love that you say, Dr. Nye, that everyone's an educator, and recognizing that this graduate of Granite is, these are the priorities for our lunch workers and for our custodians, and everybody's on board and figuring out how they can be a part of this vision. And our para-educators especially, who are, I think, often get left out, but who are so valuable in pushing these kinds of priorities, the more that we make sure to recognize that classified staff with this, I think we'll feel that power.
No, I love it, and you've probably heard me share the example of the story before. It's been told that when JFK was visiting NASA for the first time, he was walking the halls and came upon a gentleman sweeping the floors. And President Kennedy went up to him and says, "Hey, so what do you do for NASA?" And without skipping a beat, this gentleman's reply was, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." Right? He saw his role, his responsibility was to a greater purpose. Right? And for us, it's how are we graduating students from the Granite School District? So yes, absolutely to the point, how does everyone see as educators being anyone that works for the Granite School District, how do they see themselves in the work and not just a hoop or something that someone else does? Yeah, it's a great point.
Well, and I think also, though, on the other side of that, it's really important for educators, because I think as a teacher, you can get kind of mired in, this is what I'm doing in my classroom, but it's important to understand when we sat down with the district community council, this came from parents. This is what they want to see their graduate from a Granite graduate. This is what they want to see their kids learning and knowing, and graduating from Granite having these skill sets. It's not just about, because I admit it, we get tunnel vision sometimes as if we got to teach this, and this, but this is an important part of that, and that we have to be looking at the big picture and being able to help them develop those soft skills that are so critical.
And I just want to support that the discussions that we were in with those community members and parents were very thoughtful. Those parents were working hard. They were really thinking through this, and these came from them. They did not come from a boardroom. They came from parents. And it was electrifying watching it, don't you think?
I was surprised, honestly, because I thought, oh, they're going to reply this, and this, and totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it, but it truly was a grassroots, I appreciate that we did that.
I agree.
That it came from parents, so.
All right, robust discussion. Thank you, Rich and Rick, and for all the work on it. And thanks, special shout out to those parents that do take the opportunity to serve on the community council. We've revamped that recently to have one parent per school. The old model used to be 2 parents per network. So we've really expanded that out, and we've had a pretty decent sized attendance. And what we love is we have parents from every network that are able to come and give us some critical feedback. So it's been a good process. All right, next, our second info item tonight on the agenda is later start time for teens. This comes up quite a bit, and Craig Stoffer's here to walk us through this.
Good evening, and thank you, Board of Education and Superintendency. It is my privilege. I'm Craig Stoffer, the Director of Secondary Leadership and Improvement, and I'm going to present to you information about a later start time for teens, along with the pros and cons of doing that within Granite School District. So one of the things that you support is 89 schools, and these may be updated numbers from what was shared with you earlier, but we have 59,850 students from this last current year. Currently, high school starts at 7:30 a.m., junior high begins at 7:50, and then our elementary schools begin with a range from 8:15 to 9:10 based on some of our special needs classes and busing. Some of the rationale for later start time comes from the National Sleep Foundation that secondary schools should begin an hour later, which would be 8:30, in an effort to help students meet the recommended 9.25 hours of sleep for their optimal performance. 7 out of 10, or about 73% of all students at the teen years, are not getting enough sleep. And the CDC research demonstrates that the lack of sleep for adolescents is detrimental to good health, along with some of the things that we talked about, social and emotional health as well. So some of the pros to start off, proponents of delayed start time. Teens may be more likely to get a recommended amount of sleep if we were to start at 8:30 or later. Delayed start times could help teens sleep during their national sleep-wake cycles, and that normal cycle for teens is 10:45 p.m. to 8 a.m. And then teens may be less likely to depend on caffeine or stay awake during the school day. I don't know if you have teenagers and see some of the monsters and different things that they drink to function, if you would, that early in the morning. Some other pros: adequate sleep could help teens be more alert during the school day, which could boost their academic performance. Sleeping longer could reduce health-related issues that accompany sleep deprivation. Getting home later in the afternoon may reduce the amount of time some teens are home alone, which could decrease the likelihood that they engage in unhealthy activities. Now, there are several cons, and this is the first slide where I've completely violated the best protocol for PowerPoints, and that is there's so much information on this, so I apologize. But I will go through it a little bit at a time. So delaying junior high and high school start times would likely impact the schedule for all schools within the district. And this has a lot to do with our schedule with busing and what we're capable of doing versus what we may end up having to do if we were to change times. So again, currently high school begins at 7:30, junior high at 7:45, and then elementary at 8:15 through 9:10. So challenges for possible new schedules. We could start elementary, kind of flop them, if you will. 7:30 a.m. for elementary, junior high school at 8 a.m., and then high school at that recommended 8:30 a.m. time. The biggest concern here would be that we would have kids who are walking to school early in the morning, potentially, especially in the winter, which includes our kindergartners, in the dark, and buses would be required to start somewhere around 6:30 in the morning. So that's a concern by flopping them, elementary through high school. The second option could be that we start high school at 8:30, junior high at 9, and elementary even later. Question?
I had one, Craig.
Sorry.
Did someone else? Okay. On that first bullet, do we currently have high school students who are loading at 6:30 a.m.?
Correct, we do.
Okay, so we already have students, just whether we want them to be the younger ones or the older ones.
That's the big question here for you, would be, which would we prefer as far as an age group? That second bullet, so later start times for elementary poses a problem where we would have kids then that are walking home during the dark. And so again, would it be, do we want our high school kids who are walking home during the dark, or would it be the elementary students? So this start time really just starts high school at 8:30, and then we push them all back. And that means that it would require adjustments for our parents with work schedules, that type of thing as well. Maybe the ideal option would be to have junior high and high school start at 8:30, and then elementary start around that 9 a.m. The problem with that would be the additional cost. So each additional bus is somewhere around $130,000 to $150,000. We would also have to purchase land for parking. Right now, we're completely filled with the space available for parking our buses. And then we have a unique situation in Granite where we offer many full contract positions for our bus drivers. And if you were to have those bus drivers then begin junior high and not include a high school to junior high to elementary route, then we would have many of those bus drivers that would lose that full contract position, and that would be difficult. But if you were to look at those, I asked Dave Gaddy for some specific numbers, and he said that would require about 58 more buses, more bus drivers. The buses themselves would be around $8.5 million, and then around $900,000 in wages to hire the bus drivers if we were actually able to find them in our current climate right now. So I just asked him for those numbers. Karen?
I just had a comment on this. So for those who have toured the transportation hub, it is absolutely amazing the efficiency with which our buses run. They are completely organized to do double routes, and so they're not wasting time. Because obviously the more time the bus is running, the more gas it's using, and there's just so many, and to consolidate drivers and all of those things. It is fascinating to see. I'm never proclaiming we're perfect. Don't get me wrong, but our busing as it stands is incredibly efficient with the routes that are set out.
And we do have right now currently the best schedule as far as avoiding rush hour time to where that causes, if we were to go to that second bullet option where we're going even later, we would hit rush hour, which would cause the potential of students arriving late to school based on the current start times.
Did you have a comment, Clark?
I just had a question. Can you repeat those numbers for me? On the one-time cost for the buses was $8.5 million?
Yes, roughly $8.5 million.
And what was the other number? And I'm assuming that was an ongoing annual labor number?
The labor number would be ongoing, and that was $900,000.
Thank you.
And then the last bullet is teens would get out of school later in the afternoon, which could pose some problems, which I'll go on to with some more cons, if you will. But this does cause an issue for parents, potentially for childcare for younger siblings. The way we have it set up now, that high school kids get home earlier and they're able to maybe watch some of those students before parents get home from work. And then it could affect many students who have after-school jobs getting off early and being able to participate in those after-school jobs. And so it could also change some parents' work schedules. Anytime we make changes, you know that we're going to have people that are not happy and people that are very happy, and we end up having to deal with those as they arrive. The last slide that has to do with cons is students who participate in sports or extracurricular activities would be affected. It poses two potential dilemmas. The first one would be that if we were to continue as normal with the activity times happening right after school, but we started later for high school, then those students would actually have to miss more school because the rest of the state is still starting at that same time. I did get a little bit of feedback from Salt Lake City School District, who did make that change this year, and that was what they shared. The three principals is that they've noticed that it does affect students in sports, band, different clubs, that they're missing more school than they were previously. They're also, one of the big things they wanted to look at is how did it potentially shape attendance. But as Dr. Nye mentioned before, nationally we've had just a huge reduction in attendance, so they're not able to look at that data of any value for this year, and they'll have to look at it in the future. If activity start times were to change an hour later, so we could convince other schools that are not in Granite District but in our regions to start later, that could make it so that basketball, for example, that has a sophomore game, a JV game, and then a varsity game, those students would be getting home, not leaving until 10 o'clock and getting home until 11 o'clock or later. So counterproductive a little bit for that number of students, which is roughly about 15 to 20% of our students who participate in those activities. So teens may stay up even later if they don't have to wake up for school. That's something for those of you that have teenagers, you know, unless you set certain requirements for your kids, they will stay up later knowing that they don't have to go to school until later. And so that's a potential, but students have less time to do homework. They may need to stay up, and then in any scenario, it requires parents to be involved. So, question?
Are we having a lot of people request this later start time, or why are we bringing it up at all?
That's a good question. I think I'm bringing it up just to share with you the information. It has been something that was brought up to the district community council, and I shared it with them in previous years, and so maybe just a good idea to share with you in case you have.
But it's not been an increased interest in starting
Terry, we requested it because there was a bill that was run at the last legislative session that addressed this specifically, and
this young
so,
lady brought this
because of this, we've also had some increased interest in that.
We're not seeing an increased interest from the public to start later.
At this time, no.
I would disagree with that assertion. I think there is an increased awareness of this issue, and I think there's an increase of interest in exploring a shift of times. I think nationally there's a trend that's happening. There's more and more reliance upon some of these studies that are showing that it's advantageous to shift. So I think there is increased interest publicly.
Saying that's not true, I'm just
Sure.
wondering why it's being brought up.
I think it's fair, but I don't want to perpetuate a misunderstanding that there's not public interest in this issue.
No.
I think there's quite a bit.
I'm just wondering if we're seeing.
Because of the bill, there have been a few people that have brought it up.
Okay.
That's why, at least during leadership meeting, we requested, I said, I feel like, especially our new board members, if they've not heard any of this before, it's valuable for them to hear it, and also our public to be able to hear.
I think that's great.
This is why.
Just want to make sure we're clear on why.
Yeah, there was a legislative resolution, non-binding, that was passed to this point. And I've received, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 emails and a couple phone calls. So I'm receiving a handful of those that are making the request that we consider later start times. And so there's some discussion.
And that's fair, that's good.
In certain circles. So this helps navigate some of that, gives the board some consideration as we navigate what this might look like, and then can inform our next steps as well.
I can only speak to my own perspective, but I hear the issue raised often in community council meetings at multiple levels, both elementary and secondary.
I have the same experience, Clark. And in fact, I know that there is a committee forming that has parents and students from Skyline, Cottman, Olympus, and Taylorsville on it so far that want us to look at addressing this issue. So they're hoping to create change. I don't think they're like
So
organized quite yet,
good
but
for us to have.
yeah. On this, so I just finished reading a book about this issue. And, on this bottom second bullet, teens may stay up even later if they don't wake up for school and at an earlier time. When we're looking at these things, there are many schools that have done this. And so they have data to tell us whether they actually do stay up later because they have less homework, or to tell us whether, they actually do stay up later. And so I would like to be able to look at that data. And I think that in the past, we've been in a position where we had to make a lot of suppositions. But now there's enough schools that have done this that we can find out what their experience was and whether or not the hypotheses ended up being real or not, if they were proven true or false. And so I think it's really important that we look at this in terms of what have we seen in other schools other districts. And it's going to be, as we know, it's never comparing apples to apples, so that's tricky. But at least it gives us an idea of how we can take that and make it our own,
References contain that data?
I'm sorry?
Pull your mic down.
Pull your mic down, Terry.
Do these references actually contain the data showing whether they actually go to bed earlier or not? You said there's been studies done.
Well, there are references on the other slides. There are references that show data. In my book, they do have data on this, and in which I can't remember specifically to these items whether or not they were true or not, but I do remember that they had the data. I'm so helpful.
Do you have some references?
Currently, there's some more updated information, and now everything is websites, so they're kind of live. Most of the data shows that it has been more productive or helpful in urban areas versus in areas like Granite School District, because of maybe, I don't know, they didn't say specifics, they just said that it was more effective in those areas, and it could have to do with having jobs, having social economics. It could have to do with a lot of things, but that was some of the data that I looked at. Right now, there are 17% of all districts or schools nationwide that start after 8:30. The vast majority of them, there are 32% of all schools start between 7:30 and 8, and 40% that start between 8 and 8:30. So there is more and more data that's coming available. As they have more districts that are now changing, Salt Lake is one of the ones that has been in the valley, Salt Lake Valley, and so it'll be interesting to see what data they produce in the next couple of years.
When we had a discussion about this about 3 years ago too, and it seems like the data that was missing that we were very concerned about was the makeup of our district. We said, have you done data, or do you have data on how this affects especially low-income families that do rely on older kids babysitting or having that extra income in the household? And the people who presented it to us looked at us and said, no, we don't, we don't have that. So I think that's a key part of what makes up our district and makes our district unique also, aside from, some of these other districts that might have data. And that's why I think being creative, and on the next slide that he has that, what are some other options that we can offer in lieu of that, because we don't feel like we have enough data to say, yeah, we can do this. So.
Yeah. I also think that, speaking to that, in my reading, it showed that this was most effective for kids of lower socioeconomic status, that those were the kids who they saw the most academic growth. There was also some information about what academic growth they did see come from it. And so I'd like to be able to look at does this actually, help them achieve or not, And I was at West High last year and I saw this take place, and it was hard to tell because everybody had taken a year off from COVID, so it was really hard to tell how this was impacting people. But I feel like we should do it for students, but there was also an impact on teachers that is important to think about, So there are so many facets of this that I think are worth considering, and I think that we need to make sure that as we look at this, I agree with Clark. I think this is going to be a bigger and bigger issue, and that we need to understand it not on the surface level. We need to understand it a little deeper, and make sure that we're really asking, that we understand all of the pros, we understand all of the cons, we understand what is complex about it and what we're giving up if we do one thing or the other. And because I do think that, as I look at it, I'm totally torn on what I think is best here,
And to address the elephant in the room, we have to come up with $10 million. Well, there's a financial.
Only if we did that one
exactly,
option,
but
right?
but as we talk about that, we are.
100%. It's all about prioritizing resources and
we're fiscal representatives, and so we've got to anyway. But go ahead. Let's talk about some good options.
So some current options that we provide in Granite School District. We have our online self-paced program, which allows students to be able to take extra classes if they would like to graduate early. If they have such a busy schedule that they want to try to take concurrent AP classes, they can do that. But this also provides an option for parents to give their students home release, if you will, start at a later time, so an hour and a half later, and then they could pick up those classes that they would normally miss using that self-paced program. So that's one option. Another option that we've tried at several schools is to offer either a 0 period or a 5th period, and actually put it on their course selection, provide teachers an option to teach 2nd through 5th as their schedule. But what we found both years that we did this, and again, it was prior to COVID, that we didn't have enough students who were interested to fulfill the classes request, to produce those classes after school. What we did have, though, was enough students to request the classes before school. So we have jazz band, early morning seminary, some of those things that do carry, but after school classes don't carry. And that could have to do with having a job, extracurricular activities, those types of things. Julie.
Well, and I don't want to, put purpose into, students. But it is really difficult to have a fifth period class when you want to do activities. So that makes sense that that wouldn't work if it was just an optional thing rather than a part of the system. And
Definitely.
the period zero, I just, my instinct is that those are all those like, just, I'm going to go for it, super ambitious students who just, they can't fit everything into their schedule, so they got to wake up really early in order to get it all done. And they also still are in the school play and are on the baseball team or whatever. You know, I mean, so I can see why that didn't quite work, but I know a lot of parents who are asking for this option. So it's really, I'm glad we have that data to see that it's tough to man that fifth period. I also wanted to say on the online self-paced classes. So I went to lunch with a school board member from the Canyons, and they are considering in several of their junior highs this year, they're voting at some point, this was in April that I talked to her, on whether or not they would do a later start for their junior highs. And the reason that was brought on is because they had so many students who were just not registering for first period that they couldn't keep their full staff there first period. And so it became a staffing issue it is a staffing issue for them now. And so they're saying, gosh, well, we kind of now have to respond to what the public wanted. You know, I just thought I'd throw that out there, an interesting experience.
Could you be more specific on when the fifth period pilot took place and where, what schools?
So the two schools were Cypress and Hunter, and it was prior to the pandemic that was offered.
The 2 years prior?
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Any other, the last,
Craig,
yes.
piggybacking on that, at Granite Connection, I was a principal there at one point, and we had this vision of offering a fifth for any students who wanted to get ahead as well, a live offering. And very few students took us up on it. It might have had to do with travel, it might have had to do with job, it might have had to do with a lot of things, but we ran that option for a couple years and minimal interest in that fifth period.
And those are students that don't typically do extracurricular.
Yeah, and that location doesn't have extracurricular per se.
But that's also a group who is already trying to create habits of good attendance in the first place and going, right? I mean, so it's a specific population too.
Our last option is that a student could take just 3 periods a day. So parent gives them a home release for that first period. They would earn those credits, and that would be enough in 4 years if they were to not take seminary or fail a class, that they would be able to still get a 24 credit graduation. So that becomes available for our students without them doing anything other than home release. Now, it wouldn't be a specific diploma to the school. For example, a Taylorsville High School diploma, it would be a Granite School District diploma, but that option is available without taking any other self-paid classes.
I just wanted to make sure that was made clear that, yeah, it would not be because most of the graduation requirement is 27 credits, whereas for a Granite diploma, it's just 24. So that is a distinction to be made.
Okay. So what can we do? Try to educate our students and our parents, and we can do that through some of this strategic plan about just self-awareness and good health practices. So no matter what time our teens start school, it's important to support them in getting plenty of high-quality sleep. Parents need to teach their teens about appropriate sleep hygiene and talk about the benefits of sleep. And I have 2 teenagers, and so I know the difficulties of that. However, it is something that we try to do in our home, which is this second bullet. So while we can't force teens to fall asleep at a certain time, we can establish a lights out rule, put electronics away at least 60 minutes prior to going to bed, and then have them do something that calms them down and goes to sleep, like read or another activity. So those are things that we can try to do the best we can to teach, and it does become a lot on the parents to enforce those. Are there any other questions that you have?
One of the things that they kept saying in my research was that the big deal was the circadian rhythms of a child. And I really do not understand that, because I'm saying to myself, well, when I go to California, my kid just makes the time adjustment. So what is the deal with that? And I think that's one of the basic tenets of this argument, is that it's like, you can't just say to your teen, we'll go to sleep at 9 or go to sleep at 10, because their natural inclination of their body, their rhythmic, their rhythm is to go to bed later or whatever it is. And so because that's such an important tenet of that I really still don't understand. I think that's just a question that I still would like to make sure that we answer, because it really seems like it's the bedrock of this argument to me.
And a lot of that information is found on the National Sleep Foundation website, and they continue to make it current.
Explanation there?
Yeah, so it would be great.
All right, thank
Okay.
you.
I think
Clark.
the question I have for us is, where do we go from here with this? What's our next step in terms of evaluation? We've kind of talked about it in the past. I've been involved in district community council meetings years ago where this kind of same kind of pros and cons were brought up, but it's kind of the same. It's kind of same old story a few years later. So now what do we do? What do we do as a board? What's the appropriate next action?
And Clark, when we were on the district community council together, we did this because I requested it. I was the one who asked for it.
I think we did it once a year for the district
did
community
you?
council, because it was
Okay.
requested, or every other year maybe.
I'd love to know though, like I asked Salt Lake District, one of their school board members, like, what brought this on for you guys to do this? And they said one of the school board members asked to do a parent survey and find out what kind of interest there was. And we got this huge response back of parents who wanted to, who were interested in it. And I don't know if we're there yet, but it would be interesting to find out, how many people are interested in looking into this. The problem we have is that, like in Salt Lake District, they did this and told the school board there would be no increase in cost because they worked it out, but then there was an increase of cost. So I think that, it's all about a cost-benefit analysis, right? But I think that we can do the cost-benefit analysis. It's worth it to put the time into that. If we know that there's interest, then it's worth looking at, maybe.
Yeah, so I also think that if we're not having a community drive for this, and it's just us looking at it, where, because I think when Terry brought up, like, what brought this up, it's just good information. But if there is, like you were saying, there's a parent group maybe forming, maybe see what they have to say about that, because I'd be interested to see if there is interest for all of our district. We're such a large district that I would hate to see this driven by a couple school areas, but affects all of our schools. And it's such a huge shift to change times for every school, elementary. That's a big lift for our district to really do. And if there's a huge benefit because everyone is on board, if we have every network that's really interested in this, I think that's a better way to say, let's look at this. So that's my opinion.
I think even making it a little bit more known to parents, maybe making that education piece more important, that we say, hey, this is available. I don't know how many parents, I registered my new high schooler, and I didn't see any possibility for a fifth period on her schedule, or didn't even think, I did think because, but, can I not register for a first period and do something online, or, making sure that parents know this is an option. And if you have a kid that really struggles with this, because I do have a kid that really struggles with this, making sure that we let parents know, hey, this is an option for you, that you can have your kid do this, this this first period off, and you do an online class or whatever. So I think for those parents who are interested, or those kids who are interested, we need to make sure that we're educated.
To that point, I'd just like to point, we are putting together a little marketing video reminding parents what their options are, and that'll be sent out prior to the start of the school year and included in our parent handbook as well.
I was just going to, on that, my kids don't, for the most part, have a first period, and I've tried to like stay under the radar. Like, I don't want anybody to know, because that's like, you know what I mean? So I feel like it's not looked upon positively.
But it is an option.
Make it
out of the
positive
closet.
and make it an
Yeah.
option. Let's tell them.
The one
so
thing,
we can have students.
if we were to do a parent survey, I'm all for those, but I know that the parents need to be educated when they answer. I mean, to go, oh, do you like a later start time? Well, we might get a great percentage that says yes, and then you come and you say, well, it comes at millions of dollars of costs, and your taxes might go up in order to fund that, and all of a sudden the question, that simple question, takes on different meaning. So if we were to do, when parents fill out a survey, I feel like they deserve to know everything.
Amen.
And not just this little snippet.
I'm with Chris, though, now. I think that this cannot come from us. I think we need to, if it's going to come from the community, then let people come and then we'll respond to that. But otherwise, this becomes one of those things that we force down people's throats.
I'd be interested in, there's a group forming. Let's see where that goes.
And they will come. They're
Yeah.
like, what they want to do, they've told me they're not coming because they want to make sure they have representation from the whole district before they come.
And I think that's great. I think that answers your question, Clark.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. I guess my follow-on question is if there's an informal group forming, can we put some formality around that and make sure that they gain input from all of the high school networks? So I don't know what the process would be to make that happen, Ben, if that's something you could help us to create some formality around.
They don't know anybody in the other networks, so they're like, how do we find out who,
That's why I say, can we put some formality around that kind of a group and give them a chance to recruit from those other networks to then continue the process?
Then it becomes district-driven rather than
So
parent. I don't know.
I have a question, Craig. In all your studies, has anyone of the districts been 55,000 kids that have done this change of things? Have they switched? Is it are they big districts that have done this, or much smaller districts that have changed times?
Primarily, it's been smaller districts, although there is some data of a few big districts that actually I've referenced that did make that change. They just have had a difficult time being able to give measurable results to share that it's actually benefited.
Well, if I'm kind of gathering the information, I think we're going to kind of look into this group, wait to hear from our constituency, make sure all areas are represented, and then we'll take this up when that happens. Is that kind of a good summation of where we're at?
Rich,
Oh,
has that group contacted you, Rich?
No.
Oh, haven't they? Okay, yeah.
But I'd also point out, given the level of awareness that we begin to circulate in terms of those options, may also prove fruitful to see if once we send it out there, a lot of people are exploring those options, or signing up for those options. We see an intake or an uptick of the students and families that participate in that. Maybe that becomes a data point as well to determine desire and need.
Okay, thank you so much, Craig. That was a lot of information. Next on our agenda, we have 4 first readings. They're all HR policies. And we invite Doug to come up and walk us through those. A little bit of background, just real quick. We actually have formed a policy committee. And this is 3 board members assigned to serve on this committee, where we take the very, very rough drafts and we work on it and we tweak it and we discuss them. It happens once a month. And then we bring it, once we feel like it's a good enough draft, we bring it to the board for a first reading. And then after the first reading next month, it'll become a final reading. So we still have time to get feedback from everybody, and board members and parents and constituents. And then that's the process. So we turn it over to you, Doug.
Thank you. And I love the process because it does provide an opportunity for us to do a lot of the heavy lifting before we come here, which makes, we have a lot of robust discussions. Those discussions lead to good policy writing. So thank you for you board members who are part of that committee.
Board leadership serves on, so that's Nicole, me, and then Julie also serves on that committee.
And then Terry, we've also nominated you as well to serve on that.
I decline the nomination. You wouldn't want me on that committee.
I'm just kidding.
I think
some of our meetings went 3 hours, Terry. You would love it.
I appreciate the efforts, though. I think that's a good move.
No, honestly, policymaking is, you know, as it's referred to in your poli-sci classes, it's the sausage making, and that takes time and it takes effort. And so thank you for your board members for your effort to do that. Our first policy that we're going to talk about tonight is vacancies, transfers, and promotions. Just to set the table a little bit, we have a large number of HR policies that have kind of proliferated over the years, over the decades. And we are in the process, the same way we did with our board policies. If you'll remember a couple years back, we wrangled our board policies, narrowed them down, combined them, consolidated them, and made them a little bit more manageable. We're doing the same thing now with HR policies. There's a lot more of them, and we have a lot more work to do. But I think with the policies that we are working on tonight, I think we've actually identified and consolidated 17 policies down to 4. So that's what we're trying to do. One of the issues with HR policies in particular is that we had separate policies in many cases for separate employee groups, and that was creating kind of a proliferation. And so what we tried to do where we can is consolidate policies for all employee groups into one place. That's what we've done with vacancies, transfers, and promotions. So with the vacancies, transfers, and promotions, like it says, we had 12 separate policies, and we've combined those into a single policy here. This policy is intended to make standard the way that we conduct, the way that we post jobs, the way that individuals within our district can apply for those vacancies, the way we transfer, and the way we promote people within the district. We recognize that not all positions are the same, particularly in terms of how you might apply for a particular job or if you're in a particular job classification. And we had a lot of robust discussion around how teachers applying for positions is very different than how administrators apply for positions, for example. We discussed that at length, and we've come to a consensus around this Article 9A3G, and I would leave it to you to ask any additional questions since you've had an opportunity to read through it. And it's up on the board if you want to take a look at it.
I just had a couple questions. I know we just talked about this. Just because of some past experiences, on the first, on B, hiring procedures, just for me to understand this, how long are unhired people, their records? Because it talks about the applicants and their applications when they get hired, but do we have anything in policy, or is it just a part of it just to get rid of the records if they are not hired by the district, or do we continue to keep those, and for how long?
I'm sorry. I need to follow you a little bit better.
Sorry.
Under B3, is that where you're at?
B6, applicants shall provide complete and accurate information, and then it talks about all applications and supporting documentation for employment shall be received and maintained by HR. So we talked about the maintaining of it and how much we have it. For people who have applied for the district but have not been hired, is that do they continue to hold on to those applications, and for how long?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question, and I have to find out for you. I'm happy to do that and email the answer out to the board. That does not fall specifically into any of the retention schedule rules that I can think of off the top of my head. But whether we maintain applications for individuals, yeah, we do. We actually do maintain those applications. I happen to know that. How long, I don't know, and that I would have to find out for you, okay?
Does Donette know?
Patrick will know.
Donette's back there.
Oh, Donette. Welcome, Donette. How long do we keep them?
So generally, we keep them for 2 years, the same as we would an interview process with all of the interview scoring sheets and whatever have you. But given our electronic platform, we can go back much further than that. Should there be a declined application, like there's some issue with that, then that would be retained.
Okay.
Thank you, Donette.
I wasn't sure if that needed to be put into policy, that it will be retained for 2 years.
For a 2-year period.
I don't know if that's part of this, that it needs to be in there, or if not, you're the.
Yeah, well, let me think about it for a minute. I guess I'm not really prepared to respond immediately. I'd like to talk to Patrick about that, but I would be happy to email
Just because
the board out.
you're aware that we have an issue with at least one specific person who has asked about us maintaining those records and having an issue with that.
Right.
Beyond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, anyway, that's why I was thinking about it. And then just my other question was on C, where are we? C, 4. It talks about administrative transfers of teachers initiated by a supervising administrator shall be preceded by a meeting with the school leadership and improvement services director and human resources administrator to discuss the proposed transfer and the reason thereof. Do we also allow for a GEA representative to be included in that meeting? Does that need to be put into the policy, or?
We allow a GEA representative to basically be with a teacher who's a GEA member for just about any meeting. So we could put it in there. I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, just didn't know if it should be stated or not. That's all.
Okay.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion to approve as a first reading?
I move that we accept as a first reading Article 9A3G, vacancies, transfers, and promotions.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second on the table to approve as a first reading Article 9A3G, vacancies, transfers, and promotions. Any further discussion or comments from the board? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And I will commit on that one to do some research on the
Yes.
retention schedule on B6. And I will actually bring that back to our Law and Policy Committee, and then we'll have an opportunity to vet that a little bit further and then bring it back to the full board. Okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Next policy is personnel files and records. With this particular policy, there's not much change other than we have just consolidated a couple of policies. So we've combined the different employee groups policies into a single policy and try to streamline it. As you can see, there's a lot of what the policy includes is from prior policies with just some wordsmithing so that it incorporates all of the employee groups into that policy. This is compliant with GRAMA and our other policies related to privacy and our negotiated agreement. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to respond.
I feel like this is pretty straightforward, but do we have any concerns or comments? If not, I will accept a motion.
I move that we accept Article 9A31, personnel files and records. That's the first reading.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second on the table to approve as a first reading Article 9A31, personnel files and records. Any further comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, next policy is employment and supervision of relatives. There is a state rule that this is based upon. Essentially, we just kind of revised this policy. We had this policy already, but we revised it, making it a little more explicit and adding some definitions so that it's more readable and it's more coherent, really. It was a little bit vague previously, and so we've made it more clear. And I am happy to answer any questions with respect to that policy as well.
Any questions on this? Chris?
My only question was, sometimes like if an employee marries another employee, how does this?
That's a good question,
affect
actually.
them?
We've had that in the past.
Yeah.
We typically, the issue only becomes one of
Are
one.
you asking sorry,
No,
can
that's
I just
okay.
clarify what she's talking about? Because right now
Please.
we have drugs, alcohol, and tobacco. Are you talking about that or employment?
He skipped to the employment and
Oh, you
supervision
moved
of.
it. Doug, what
Oh, you
is
know
so
what?
I
That's my fault. That was my fault.
I skipped it too, so I
I
didn't
did
know.
them- I did them-
just went and scrolled.
I'm so
Sorry, Doug.
confused.
I did that out of order. I apologize.
No, you're good. I'm just apparently not listening. So, okay, so you did employment and supervision. I'm going off of my list, not listening. Sorry. Okay, Chris, that is a very appropriate question. Will you ask that again?
We don't want married couples doing
Hopefully they're
drugs
not on
either.
drugs, and there we go.
I'm sorry.
No, let's go with the employment and supervision of relatives thing first.
Very good. Okay, so the question that as I understand it, Chris, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's when relationships actually change. If people get married, then do they become, does that become a problem if it violates the policy? We've actually had that in the past. The rule that we're trying to preserve is that we don't want individuals who are relatives to supervise one another. And so if they were to get married and be in that supervisory role, we would look for opportunities for a transfer or something else so that we wouldn't fire one of them, but we would look for opportunities for them to be able to find another position in another location where they wouldn't violate that rule.
Do you consider a department chair over, like, if two English teachers got married and one of them was the department chair, do you consider that a supervisory role or not?
No, and only because if you look at the policy, it's the prohibitions are based on supervisors who can hire, fire, and discipline and that sort of thing.
Just want that clarified. Thank you.
All right, do we have a motion?
Go ahead, Chris.
Make sure you read the right one.
I know.
Sorry about that.
I move we accept for the first reading Article 9A1C, employment and supervision of relatives.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second on the table to approve as the first reading Article 9A1C, employment and supervision of relatives. Any further questions, discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now on to drugs, alcohol, and tobacco.
Thank you very much. This policy, it looks like there were a lot of changes to this policy. However, those changes were, again, just in the process of consolidation. We did add additional definitions because the state rule provided some definitions that were useful here, and so we added essentially a definition section to our former policy. The rest of the policy is left relatively unchanged, but we added those definitions for clarity and to make sure that the policy is more readable and accessible to the public and to our employees. So with that, I'm happy to answer any further questions. Oh, sorry, Dan.
I noticed you changed the wording on C1 in particular, but C1 and 2, from district employees, volunteer students, and patrons to individuals. And I understand that it still means the same thing. Is everybody, how do we clarify that for our patrons as well? Because I feel like that's where we get some.
Yeah, that's a good question. And the idea is that we didn't want to, the law itself, it makes those actions illegal. It's actually illegal, unlawful. It's a violation of criminal law for anyone to engage in those activities that are listed there. And so we didn't want to limit that. And frankly, you know, guests, people at football games, I mean, those kinds of things, we wanted to make sure that they were at least put on notice of their obligation under the policy, even though, you know, it would probably be the law enforcement that would have to handle those circumstances.
Do we have a motion on this policy?
A motion that we approve as a first reading, Article 9A1B, the drugs, alcohol, and tobacco policy.
We have a motion and a second to approve as a first reading Article 9A1B, drugs, alcohol, and tobacco policy. Any further discussion from the board? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, thanks Doug for all your work on this.
Thank you, board members, appreciate you.
All right, we are moving towards the end of our agenda this evening. We're going to turn the time over to Dr. Nye for a superintendent report.
Thanks, Board President. I'll be brief. We continue the work of the district, even though it's summer. And so we have a lot of professional development going on of our teachers or administrators. Some are participating in that. We have summer programs going on in some of our schools where they're still welcoming students there. We're providing meals across the district. And so appreciate the good work, our staff employees that are growing in their capacity and improving their trade, so to speak, as well as continuing to meet the needs of families and students on a large continuum from child nutrition to some additional academic resources. So we're continuing to get good work, and we look forward to, as we don't want to wish away the summer, at the same time we're preparing. And we wanted to finish this last year strong, and we feel like we have in a good place given the challenges that we've had, in order to start this school year strong. So we're doing the work, the preparation, to make sure that when we welcome everyone back, that we're ready to welcome them back and hit the ground running first day of school. So looking forward to that, and we'll provide more information as to what those plans for preparation look like in the near future. Thanks, Board President.
All right, thanks, Dr. Nye. Board reports, let's start with Clark.
I don't have anything this evening that merits taking further time in this meeting.
Julie.
I also do not have a board report today.
Terry.
I have nothing to report.
Chris.
I have one little thing to report. At the Magna Parade yesterday, Granite School had a bus, and Dave Gaddy drove that bus, and Patrick Flanagan was there, and it was really awesome. So it was great. That was my report.
I don't have anything.
I'm going to break the trend here. My kids have been participating in the Granite Junior Symphony and the IBOC program, which is for the beginning orchestra and band students in the district, and have been going every morning to Cottonwood High School, who's been so gracious to host them, and have had a marvelous experience, even though they've had to get up early for another month. And I've had to play taxi driver all morning. But I just wanted to say thanks to the staff that has put that together, to the teachers who have worked so hard to make that a good experience for the kids, for the parents who have been supportive of their kids going to that. I know the Granite Senior Youth Symphony got back today from their trip, and I believe they were invited to come play for the teacher kickoff in the fall. Anyway, for the bus drivers who've continued to work and do that to make that possible for the kids, but it's just been a marvelous experience for them, and I appreciate the hard work that's gone into that all around, so thanks.
Thanks, Nicole. I don't have much. I just want to say I hope that our teachers are putting their feet up a little bit, bus drivers, nutrition workers, paraeducators. We just hope you're refilling your tank. We know that this last year has been so exhausting, and in a lot of ways we've heard feedback that it's been harder than even 2 years ago with COVID. And so we just hope you're kind of taking the time to take care of yourself and re-energize so that we can come back together and and work wonders in the fall. So that's my biggest thing. As I've sat here, I think one of the things I just want to say is, as we talk about our mission statement and vision statement, as we talk Granite Graduate, I just had a thought, if we can personalize every job position, I can help kids be a Granite graduate by driving them to school. I can help kids be a Granite graduate by feeding them a nutritious lunch. I can help, and on, by pulling them into intervention groups or whatever, and obviously teachers by teaching them to the best of my ability. So I think as we can catch the vision of this Granite Graduate together to be able to personalize it down to the very core of what you do for Granite, because hey, we're all educators. It doesn't matter what our title is. We're all here for the same goal, the same purpose. And if we can establish that culture of a Granite Graduate and really bring it down to a personal level on how I can help, it can be, I keep the bathrooms clean so we can have kids graduate. It can be, I need the classrooms the appropriate temperature, whether not too hot, not too cold. Every single position in Granite can be brought down to the success of the Granite graduate. And so as we think about that, I just invite board members to kind of really, let's process this. What does that look like? What is our vision statement need to become? What is our mission statement? And how, like Julie, you mentioned this earlier, how can we get that buy-in? I think some of that buy-in comes with personalizing it to the very core of people who choose to work for us and with us to the success of Granite kids, because that's what it's about. And so that's my report. That's all I have. And before we adjourn, we do have need of an executive session this evening for two purposes. One is character and competence of an employee, and the second is negotiations. So with this, now Doug, remind me, can we do this in one motion or do they have to be separate motions for two different purposes?
One motion will work just fine.
One motion, stated two different reasons, correct? All right. Perfect, okay.
I motion that we go into an executive session for the purpose of character and competence and negotiations.
I'll second.
Right, we have a motion and a second on the table to go into executive session for the purpose of the character and competence of an employee, as well as negotiations. This is a roll call vote. We'll start with Clark.
Aye.
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 And aye, and so we will go into executive session now. Doug, do we adjourn this meeting? Yes. But we will adjourn. But before we do, we need a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Hey, thanks everybody for coming tonight. Let's take a 10-minute break, but make your way up to the conference room. It's upstairs. Whoa. What is this? Except for the It's Winnie the Pooh.